We are looking for the best deal for Canada. We're only going to accept the best deal for Canada. That is very much informed by our discussion.
What do you get when a former central banker, a defiant northern neighbor, and an ex-president with a Twitter tantrum walk into a trade war? Answer: one hell of a geopolitical face-off. The kind that makes economists sweat, investors panic, and pundits go on 5-hour live streams. Donald Trump thought he could squeeze Canada with tariffs. Classic pressure play: slap on a 25% levy, shout national security, and wait for the neighbor to blink. But guess what? Canada didn't blink. It didn't flinch. It didn't even sneeze. Instead, Mark Carney, the guy who steered both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, stepped out of the shadows and executed a pivot so swift, so smooth, it was practically Canadian kung fu. And this time, Canada didn't just look south. It looked east and far, far west, all the way to Berlin, Tokyo, and Seoul. This isn't just some trade spat between old allies. This is a tectonic shift. Trump's latest trade war has globalized itself, whether he meant to or not. The ripple effects? Already hitting boardrooms from Detroit to Dusseldorf, and the twist? It's not Trump leading the headlines, it's Canada. Mark Carney, once hailed as the most trusted man in global finance, is now Canada's economic North Star. Backed by Ottawa, he's spearheading a recalibration of trade ties away from the turbulence of Washington and straight into the arms of Asia and Europe. This isn't a tantrum, it's a masterclass in restraint and resilience. Trump wanted to punish Canada. Canada decided to partner with the world. The showdown ignited in mid-July 2025, Washington, D.C. Trump's press conference looked more like a campaign rally. Flags, fists, fury. Ottawa, calm, calculated Carney. He stood at Parliament Hill, not with rage, but with resolve. Brussels, Tokyo, Seoul, where diplomacy hummed behind closed doors, away from truth social chaos. July 15th, Trump levies a 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum. July 16th, Carney outlines a counter-strategy rooted not in retaliation, but realignment. Canada announces a triple play: solidify trade ties under CETA with Europe, double down on CPTPP in the Pacific, and launch new clean energy partnerships with Asia. This isn't just a Canadian response, it's a global rerouting. How it happened? Here's the play-by-play of how Canada pulled off one of the most graceful geopolitical pivots in recent history. July 15th, Trump's team slaps 25% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum. The reason? National security concerns. Never mind the decades of military alliance and shared NORAD defense. July 16th, Mark Carney delivers a measured response. No insults, no rage, just strategy. He announces an immediate pause on new Canadian steel shipments to the U.S., citing market instability. July 17th and 18th, Carney boards a plane to Brussels. High-level meetings with EU officials ensue. Germany and France express deep interest in expanding direct raw material trade with Canada, especially for EV batteries and hydrogen fuel. July 20th, a Canadian delegation lands in Tokyo. The agenda? Deepen clean energy tech cooperation. South Korea quickly follows with interest in joint lithium processing ventures and AI research sharing. And in the middle of all this, Trump, red-faced, takes to Truth Social. Canada thinks they're slick? They'll come crawling back. America doesn't need their steel. We make our own. Tariffs go higher. Canada inked clean energy deals with Hyundai and Samsung by July 23. EV battery supply chains are being redrawn, and the U.S. scrambling. That's not folding, folks. That's checkmate, with a maple leaf on the chessboard. Let's not sugarcoat it. This is political theater. Trump's tariff blitz is designed for applause in Pennsylvania and Ohio, not for economic logic. He needs a win for the 2026 campaign trail, and tariffs, well, they make good sound bites. But for Canada, this wasn't about theatrics. It was about survival and sovereignty. Mark Carney had warned for years about the dangers of economic overdependence on any one partner, especially one as politically volatile as the US. He'd seen Brexit, navigated currency collapses, and sat across from both Wall Street sharks and Westminster hardliners. Carney's strategy has always been clear: diversify or be dictated to. So when Trump pulled the trigger, Carney already had a contingency plan, and Ottawa backed him. Meanwhile, Canadian businesses, long wary of US instability, had been gradually expanding eastward. This wasn't reactive, it was proactive. Strategic alliances were already warming. Carney didn't panic, he pivoted, and the world followed. The economic aftershocks are already rolling in. Canadian steel mills scaling down US contracts, rerouting exports to EU partners. Germany has already increased Canadian imports by 18% in just 2 weeks. American automakers facing aluminum shortages and supply chain snags. Ford and GM quietly lobbying Washington for exemptions. Trade lanes. Halifax and Vancouver seeing spikes in Asian-bound cargo, while U.S.-bound shipments fall. Energy diplomacy. A bilateral U.S.-Canada summit on green hydrogen canceled. Currency markets. The Canadian dollar strengthened against the U.S. dollar as confidence in Carney's pivot boosted investor sentiment. Ordinary Americans already noticing upticks in prices, especially in sectors tied to Canadian imports like construction, appliances, and autos. Canada didn't burn bridges. It just built new ones, better ones. Some headlines flew under the radar, but they matter. Germany offered to co-develop Canada's Arctic LNG facilities in exchange for priority access. Japan's Hitachi announced a $400 million investment in Ontario's battery research hubs. The Netherlands quietly brokered a carbon credit swap deal with Canadian regulators, a first outside the EU. And that rumor, it's real. Mark Carney is being courted to head a new global green infrastructure fund, backed by the IMF and World Bank, a role that could place him at the helm of $200 billion in climate-driven finance. Trump was trying to control trade headlines. Instead, he turned Carney into the world's hottest economic diplomat. As of August 2025, Canada is fast-tracking trade corridors with India and Australia. ASEAN countries, especially Vietnam and Indonesia, are opening discussions for resource-sharing deals. The EU Parliament is drafting legislation to elevate Canadian partnerships under CETA to strategic priority status. Meanwhile, back in Washington, U.S. businesses are pressuring both parties. Republicans and Democrats alike are hearing from frustrated CEOs, lobbyists, and even farmers who relied on Canadian parts or distribution networks. And Trump? Still tweeting. But increasingly, the world's no longer listening. Canada isn't reacting anymore. It's leading. So what have we learned, folks? You can bluster all day long, you can hurl tariffs, fire tweets, and wave flags. But if the other side has brains and options, the game changes. Mark Carney didn't panic, he prepared. He built trade lifeboats before the storm. And when Trump lit the fuse, Canada floated right on. The world didn't fold, the world rerouted. If you found this fascinating, hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. Is Trump's trade war isolating America or just making others stronger? And hey, if you're from Canada, don't be shy. Has your country finally embraced its global role?